All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations and some code and writing a little bit of code for Murock's Android Programming 2nd Edition by Joel Murock for the AWD1112 or 1112 Java Programming class. We're about halfway into Chapter 6, and it's time to start talking about low-level events. So we talked about the high-level events, and in particular, we looked at the high-level events for checkboxes, radio buttons, radio groups, spinners, and seek bars. Now it's time to talk about the low-level events, or key events and touch events, and we'll end the chapter by seeing how all this stuff kind of applies to our tip calculator app. All right. So in Chapter 3, we learned how to handle the click event, which is a low-level event. Now we'll learn how to handle some other low-level events, including key and touch events. Most Android devices are touchscreen devices that the user can interact with by touching the screen. Some of these devices include hardware components, which may be a keyboard, a D-pad, or a trackball. All right, or it may be other buttons. There may be a power button, a home button, a back button, etc. When a user presses a hardware button, a key event occurs. So the code that you're seeing up on the screen right here, and is also shown on page 181 of the text, shows how to handle a key event. To handle such an event, you must implement the on-key listener that's nested in the view class and wire said listener to any widget. So the key event contains constants, and we can see them here, for almost every possible hardware key on a device, including the keys on the hardware hard keyboard or D-pad. Keyboard enter is the enter key on a hard keyboard. Key code enter. The key code D-pad center is the center key on the D-pad. The key code D-pad left is the left key on the D-pad. The key code D-pad right is the right key on the D-pad. And the key code space is the space key on the hard keyboard. The on-key method that we can see right here, if you look at it near the top, it returns a Boolean value that indicates whether the method has consumed the event. If it returns true, the event is not passed on to the parents of the current widget. Now, if you don't wire an event handler for a key event to multiple child widgets, you can wire the key event to the parent if you want to. Then the event handler handles any key events that aren't consumed by the children. You can also use the get system service method to get an input method manager object. Then you can use that object to hide the soft keyboard. We'll see more of that. I think it's in chapter 11 as we go on. Touch events on pages 182 and 183. When a user touches a widget on a touch screen device, a touch event occurs on that widget. Most of the time, you don't need to know how to handle this event. Rather, you can use another event like a click event to get the app to basically react any way you want it to react. However, sometimes you may need to handle a touch event. If you want to do that, you must implement the onTouch listener, and the onTouch listener is nested in the view class. Then you wire that to any widget. In the example that you see on your screen right here, the touch method includes code that sends data to logcat. Now, there are some constants that are used in this, all right? And they include action down, which is the start of the touch, action up, which is the end of the touch, and action move, where the touches move between the down and the up actions. In addition, there's some methods that are associated with the motion event class. Get action, which gets an integer value for the type of action. Get x, which gets the float value for the x-axis on the touch. get y, which gets a float value for the location of the y-axis on the touch, get history size, which gives you the number of historical events, get historical x, which gets a float value for the x-axis at the specified position of the stored historical value, and get historical y, which gets the float value for the y-axis at the specified position of the stored historical value. So this on-touch method returns, again, a Boolean value that indicates whether or not the method has consumed or basically used the event. All right, so taking a look at the screen right here, you can see how the code has changed. In other words, we've added this section down at the bottom. We also have the little splitter in between, but now we're asking, do you want to round? And I believe that's, do you want to round the, do no rounding? Do you want to round up the tip? So here we would round it up to $7. Do you want to round up the total? Here we round it up to $33. Plus, we're going to have this drop down, all right, or spinner here that says, do you want to split the bill? And if you do, you can not split it 2 ways, split it 3 ways, etc. All right, and if you do want to split it, in this case 3 ways, 1304 times 3 is going to give you 3912. All right. All right, another phone call. Sorry about that, but as we go in here and we look, we see what we have added to our user interface. So the author says on 184 and 185, welcome to the new and improved tip calculator. You may or may not agree with that. This one uses a seek bar for the percent, 3 radio buttons right here that are set up in a vertical type of configuration. All right. It uses a radio button group, which is holding those radio buttons. All right, and a spinner, which is, again, what's down here. So the code for the app handles the events that occur on these. So figure 6.9 on page 185 shows the user interface. Okay, we can now set the tip percent by dragging the thumb on the seek bar. And I believe that since we're using the emulator, I believe we just use you just use your mouse. If you want, you can round the tip or the total, or both, to the nearest dollar by selecting the appropriate radio button. I guess one or the other, or neither. Wouldn't be much to add one, though, that said both if we wanted to do that. We can also split the bill between multiple people by using the spinner that's down here. And if you don't want to, it's going to hide these two things here at the bottom. So this version, again, has a seek bar, a radio group, 3 radio buttons, and a spinner. We can set the new tip percent by dragging our thumb, or again with the emulator with the mouse, to the right or to the left. We can also now round the tip or the total to the nearest dollar, and we can split the bill if desired. So what's shown on 187, 188, and 191, 192, 193 is the code in figure 610 for this new and improved tip calculator. All right, so what the author chooses to do here is to expand upon the things that have changed or have been added. All right, so the code has to you notice there's a lot more import statements. Now, you probably know this already, but as this gets really big and you get a lot of import statements like this, all right, you can typically click up here and hide them. They're still there, all right, but you've hidden what is there. And, again, when you look at what's shown on the screen here, I'm not going to count these, but it's got to be upwards of 20, all right? So you may find that a little bit encumbering. I don't even know what the right word is, but again, I just showed you how you can hide them if you so desire. All right. In addition, we now previously we had only on editor, then on I think it was, what was it, on item, I don't remember which one it was. But now we've got on seek bar change, on check changed, on item selected listener, and on key listener. All right. We also have more instance variables. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the ones we had previously. We've added a radio group, which is going to hold our 3 radio buttons, the spinner, all right, and the per person label and the per person text view. All right. In addition, we've added some constants in here, 0, 1, and 2. The reason you typically do this is it's much easier when you're writing code to use constants. Your code becomes much more human readable. You don't do this for the computer's sake. You do this for your own sake. All right? Okay. The on pause and the on resume that are in here, they work pretty much the same as they did in chapter 3, but the on pause contains new code to save the instance variables for the state of those new widgets in case we go to another app, etc. Similar, the on resume needs new code to reset the state of those widgets. Now, I'm not going to sit there and take the time to write this code out for you. I will tell you that what you will have, and I don't have it out there yet, but by the time you watch these videos, ideally at least, you will have it out there. And that is, where is it? Book Apps, Chapter 6, Tip Calculator. So you'll have the whole thing out there. You'll have all the code that's shown throughout this chapter, including the code on 187, 188, 189, 191, 192, and 193. All right, so going back now into here, the calculate and display method, which again is shown on here. So there's the on pause, which again has some new code for the new stuff we added. There's the on resume with again some new code for what we've added. And the calculate and display, which is discussed on page 190 and is shown on page 191, in many ways, the calculate and display has gotten much bigger. It contains new code that rounds the tip and the total if as necessary. In addition, it contains the new code that calculates the split amount. Now, that said, I'm not going to go over any of this because this is logic stuff. This is all stuff, if we were writing this as a regular Java program, as opposed to writing this, so if we wrote this as a Java program, as opposed to writing this as a Java app, I would think the logic would totally make sense to you. So I'm concentrating on what's new, and that's the stuff for the app. All right, so again, this has gotten much bigger, as you can see. All right, then on 192 and 193 in the book, they have the event handler code. All right, this we've already seen pretty much. All right, how this stuff is handled. This is now for the seek bar, so you'll notice we need to put in all 3 of these methods, even though 2 of the 3 don't have any code in them. All right, now it says there, they talk about auto-generating the stuff. If you auto-generate, it'll put it in alphabetic order. You do not have to put them in alphabetic order. As long as you list all 3, in fact, is it in alphabetic order? On start out, it doesn't even look like it is. All right. Next, we've got the check changed for the radio group, and this is shown on the bottom of page 192. Again, this should make sense. You're setting it either to no rounding, all right, or you're rounding the tip, or you're rounding the total. Those are our 3 options, and then you're calling calculate and display. This is for the spinner. So you're figuring out which, if you chose that you wanted to split the bill, how many ways, and then you're calling calculate and display. Remember that when you put in the on item selected for the spinner, You must implement the on nothing selected even if there's no code in there. Talked about that earlier. And then finally, on the bottom half of 193, they've got the code in there for handling the keyboard and the D-pad. Now that is it for the chapter. So hopefully you've got at least a minimal understanding of high-level events, low-level events, what each is, how they differ, and how they work. Ideally, we're now also able to handle events that occur on widgets that were described in this chapter. And it'll be a good prologue or a good beginning for how we handle other kinds of widgets in later chapters. All right? So, in the next chapter that we're going to go through, which is chapter 7, about the same size as this chapter, we're going to be talking about themes and styles. So this chapter will show how to use themes and styles to automatically set properties for widgets. Okay? We'll get to that in just a couple minutes.